Thank you for joining the Pursuing a Whole Family Approach produced by the National Community Action Partnership. I am Tiffney Marley, Vice President for Practice Transformation, and I am joined on today's presentation by my colleague, Jeannie Chaffin, who is a Special Advisor for Whole Family Approach for the National Community Action Partnership. Today's presentation will focus on gaining a deeper understanding of the 2-gen or whole family approach. Why the whole family approach? Here's a little bit of information about the state of our children here in the United States. And as we think about this, or as we talk about this, we come into this conversation with the assumption that our children are our future. So with this in mind, the truth is about 16% or 12 million of children live in poverty. Our youngest children are our poorest. And 60% of poor children live in small cities, suburbs, and rural towns. And according to the Children's Defense Fund, where all of this data has been shared with us, from their Ending Child Poverty Now publication, they assert that 2 in 3 poor children live in families with an adult who works. Another reality that is important for us to hold in our assumptions or hold in mind is, according to the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a business case for racial equity, while it's projected that children of color will be the majority by 2043, they are disproportionately impacted by poverty, resulting in the lack of access to the opportunities and resources that they need in order to thrive. Let's go a little further into this conversation as we think about this whole notion of what we would call economic and socially dangerous indicators or factors. Every year, we leave millions of children in poverty in our nation. About $7 billion is lost in productivity and increased health and crime costs. Additionally, the 3 richest men in America hold more of our nation's wealth than the bottom half of our population of 327 million people. And so there's that tension, as it were, between lost productivity or lost resources and increased health and crime costs, but also that gap, that wealth gap between a few of those who are the most wealthy in our society and the rest of our population. And so the other thing that we would like to introduce into the conversation today is that growing up in poverty undermines healthy child development and ultimately can perpetuate negative impacts for a lifespan. And so let's put it this way. We're talking about children who are our future within the United States and the various ways in which they are affected by our current economic condition. And the truth is, if certain strategies or certain approaches are not taken to address the economic realities for children who are our future, if we don't do this, really the future social and economic security for all of us will be at stake. So let's take a moment then to pivot. So we've shared some statistics around what the state of poverty is, especially as it relates to children, and that's not where we want to remain. So we've talked about the fact that the future is at stake for all of us. And so at this time, we want to introduce an alternate vision or an alternate consideration. And that is that there is a way forward, and there are lots of innovations at work, the whole family approach being one of them, or the two-generation approach being one of them. But these innovations really begin to turn us towards results beyond anything achieved before. And as we think about the interruption of intergenerational poverty that currently exists in our society, these innovations, or this innovation, suggests that in order to achieve a result, it's important to meet families where they dream versus where they are. And these innovations suggest maximizing people's potential and to contribute to the civic, social, and economic lives of our communities. And ultimately, by doing so, we are able to produce a legacy of family well-being that passes from one generation to the next. And so as we think about accelerating social and economic mobility, and again, interrupting intergenerational poverty, achieving this vision will require accelerating social and economic mobility beyond anything we've ever done before. And this vision may also require that we aspire for deeper engagement with families, being data-driven, being person-centered, that we give attention to racial equity, innovation, and achieving greater impact. So let's take a moment to talk a little bit about human capacity. And human capacity really starts with maybe gaining a deeper understanding of human development itself, which is the idea that people grow and change over their lives in an ongoing process shaped by environments and experiences. And here's a graphic that was put together by Ellis Dietz. Ellis calls this a new framework for addressing adverse childhood and community experiences as a part of the Building Community Resilience, or the BCR model. And it's a part of an ongoing, set of tools and resources and studies that have taken place. But in essence, this particular image that we see, it focuses on what they call the pair of ACEs. And let me take a moment to tell you what we mean when we say ACEs. And so in this case, we're talking about adverse childhood experiences as well as adverse community environments. And so as it relates to those adverse childhood experiences, otherwise known as ACEs, they include all of the things that we see on the in and around the tree. And so physical and emotional neglect, divorce, mental illness, incarceration, homelessness, domestic violence, substance abuse, emotional and sexual abuse, maternal depression. And so in essence, the theory is that, and I'll ask my colleague Jeannie to even help me elaborate a little bit on this, but as it relates to adverse childhood experiences, it's likely that most human beings, most people would experience at least one of these in their lifetime. And certainly as we compound these experiences, so as a person experiences multiple of these adverse childhood experiences, then there is a body of thinking out there that suggests that there are negative indicators that are associated with that, and that can be projected over a lifespan, as it were. And then as we look at this whole notion of adverse community environments, it's not just about what people's individual experiences are. There are also some things that are, as you can see in this graphic, sort of taking place under the surface and sort of feeding into the various individual experiences that an individual may encounter. And so under the surface, we see things like poverty, discrimination, community disruption, lack of opportunity, economic mobility and social capital, poor housing, equality and affordability, violence. And in many cases, those are things that play out, or how can I put it, conditions that play out in systems that have like a broader or greater impact in person's environment, so to speak. Jeannie, would you like to add to that in any way?
Sure. I would just add by saying what I think you've already said, Tiffany, but just reiterate that, people shape their environment, but people are also shaped by their environment. And what we want to do to achieve the results that we've been talking about is we want to interrupt or buffer some of these experiences that children have. And we want to think about how to create healthier environments. And so I think you're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But it's just a matter of sort of just thinking about how people shape their environment and how they're shaped by their environment.
Thank you very much. And so ultimately, our thinking, and there's thinking around us that supports the fact that even though a child, or even though a parent or a family may have these experiences, and again, these experiences sort of have a certain set of negative indicators associated with them, that doesn't have to be the final outcome as it relates to the individuals or to the human beings involved. And so the Building Community Resilience Collaborative, again, as they have sort of painted the picture of those adverse child experiences and those adverse community environments, have also pointed to a different vision, as it were, one in which, given the right supports and interventions or innovations, which we are talking about today for that matter, there's an opportunity for the cultivation of supportive adults and healthy households. And as we look at some potential positive outcomes or some potential positive results, those could include fewer youth in mental health crisis, for example, or families drawing on their strength, or parents experiencing steady employment, or individuals or there being reduced crime, or fewer young people involved in the justice system, or fewer children in foster care. And then as we look underneath the surface, so we saw those categories that range from from poverty to challenges related to housing, just other systematic or infrastructural things on the earlier slide. In this scenario, as we engage in the appropriate innovations, there's an opportunity for connected systems on the community level and supports that really feed into a thriving reality or increased well-being for families. And so as we think about, again, this whole notion of human capacity, we have a role and a stake in ensuring that the vital conditions for optimal development are available to all, not just to some, across the various stages of environment. The various stages of development. And so everyone has value, and given the right conditions, they have the ability to live up to their fullest potential. And so when we support well-being, we make sure that everyone can reach their fullest potential and contribute to our communities, maximizing people's potential that not only help those individuals, but help communities to thrive. And so then as we think about applying the whole family approach or the two-generation approach lens to this, building the well-being of children and the adults in their lives result in stronger and better lives for both generations. And at the end of the day, an important assumption to continue to hold is that families do indeed have the potential to grow and to change. And so at this time, I am going to pass on the conversation to Jeannie, who's going to talk a little bit more about understanding the whole family approach or the two-generation approach. Jeannie, I'm going to pass the ball over to you now.
Thank you, Tiffany. So Tiffany's talked to us a little bit about the why of two-gen or whole family, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the what. What is two-gen? What is whole family? And how can an organization, if they're trying to achieve better results than they've ever achieved before, how might they use the whole family approach to do that? So the first little building block that we want to lay down for folks as they're thinking about whole family or two-gen is to understand that it's really built on service integration as one component. Service integration is the concept of coordinating access to multiple types of services in order to empower economic stability. And you might hear this called coordinated service delivery or bundled services, but it's all sort of in the area of service integration. And service integration can be done for a lot of different kinds of populations, right? In your organization, you might be integrating services for folks who are returning from prison. You might be integrating services for veterans or for senior citizens. With the two-gen or whole family approach, we're obviously thinking about integrating services for families. So one of the things that you may want to look at in your organization as you're sort of starting on your two-gen whole family approach journey is how well are we doing, or how advanced are we in our effort to integrate services, because we're really, in essence, talking about integrating services for parents and children together. And that's how we build family well-being, by working with children and the adults in their lives. And through that, we get efficiencies and improved outcomes. Outcomes are enhanced for parents, children, families, and the community. So you may hear me say two-generation, or I may also say whole family approach. As you're looking at the literature in this field, you'll probably see both. And one of the things we always like to talk about with folks is that families define themselves. We have all kinds of different families in our communities. We have a lot of grandparents raising grandchildren. We have multi-generations in households. And so in the end, what we're really talking a bit about is children and their caretakers. And their caretakers may take some different shapes and different forms. We say children, and there's children are all along the age continuum, infants, children, teenagers. You see 2-gen whole family efforts that serve different age groups of children. And we don't really get into it today in this overview, but obviously the science pushes us to think about very young children. We know 0 to 5 are important developmental years, and the sooner that we intervene and we get a family out of poverty, the shorter the spell of poverty for that child, the better their chances, their positive outcomes can be. So although 2-gen whole family approaches at organizations can be designed with different target populations, you really do want to think about the science and think about early child development as you're designing your whole family 2-gen approach. So this graphic here, this continuum, is really helpful in helping you to think about your child services and your parent services at your organization, and which of your services may be both parent and child focused and really address the whole family. And in our field, in the human service field, we have a lot of programs that are somewhere along this continuum. And just sort of thinking as you're designing your program, which of your services are parent, which are child, is kind of helpful. And how can you bring any of those services together in an effort to serve the whole family? Ascend, who is really a leading thinker on 2-gen whole family approaches and has really developed the 2-gen whole family field, has a very good high-level theory of change laid out about what we're really talking about here with 2-gen and whole family. So the idea is that we have families, we have parents and their children, and we intervene by working with families, providing coaching and a range of services in a number of domains. Post-secondary workforce for parents to help them get on their journey to social and economic well-being. Some families need health and well-being supports, economic assets, perhaps benefits for moms and dads while they're trying to get training, financial literacy, social capital, which is often called the secret sauce of 2-gen whole family, figuring out how to help people connect to others in their community to build healthy, supportive networks that will help them achieve their goals and reach their full potential. And then finally, early childhood education supports for children and education for parents and for older children and youth. So not every family needs all of these kinds of supports, but the idea with 2-gen whole family is that the supports that families do need are there, and they're coordinated for the family to help that family thrive and be healthy, and to help our communities be healthy. So that's sort of the theory of change that we're working on at the very highest level. And your task really, as you're working on your 2-gen whole family approach, is to figure out your design at your agency, how you're going to weave your services and those of your partner together to create a robust robust 2-gen effort. So here you can see in a little bit more detail some of the examples in each of the domains, and sort of the idea is that these sort of work together, that they're integrated for families, and that we meet families where they are, depending on what their needs might be. Over time, we've kind of created some key characteristics. 2-gen whole family is not a checklist. You can't just say, okay, what's the checklist, and I'm going to access all of those things, and I'll have my 2-gen whole family approach. But there are some things that you can think about that need to be present. And the first of those would be that family goals are shared across programs, that if your early childhood intervention and your parent intervention have separate goals for parents and children, that's probably not 2-gen whole family. You want to have shared goals. You want to be working together for the benefit of parents, children, and the entire family. So you want to have shared goals, and along that same line, you want to include outcomes for children, parents, and family. So sometimes our programs just have outcomes for the parents. A workforce program might be thinking about the workforce needs of a parent and not really considering what the needs of the children or the family as a whole might need. And so with 2-gen whole family, we're working and looking and thinking about the goals of everybody in the family. And as I mentioned earlier with service integration, you really want to align a suite of services for families that respond to their unique needs across those domains. So, families have unique needs, and part of the challenge of 2-gen and whole family is thinking about how you help each family meet those needs that they have. And oftentimes that can't be done by one organization, and that's where a lot of partners come in, and working with others in the community is important. We often talk in whole family about making access to services and supports easier, really taking the burden for coordination off of the families and onto the program and administration. So figuring out how you design your program so that families don't have to run around and figure out, the complicated mix of services in most communities, but that their engagement with you as an organization helps to do that. And then finally, and maybe the most important characteristic to think about as you do your design, is that your parent and child services need to be high quality and they need to be integrated. It doesn't do much good to integrate mediocre or low quality services. So if you're having some challenges with any of your services in the quality, you need to address that before you really move on to your whole family approach journey. And then there need to be intentional parent and child services at the same time. So although many programs may be serving people who are parents, they're not providing an intervention to the child at the same time, or vice versa. So you got to think about how you're serving parents and children at the same time. So often this might mean that you have children in an early childhood program, and then those parents' children, you're helping them to get training or to get jobs or address some other need, intensive need that parent has. When we say intensive, one of the reasons that is listed here is that we want to make sure that the interventions for both the parent and the child are of a dosage and a duration that's really going to help that family achieve social and economic mobility. If we're truly trying to end generational poverty, that's going to take more than just a light touch service intervention. And so really thinking about, is our program high quality? Is it intensive? Are our services intentional? Is important, and all of these things are really the hallmark of good whole family 2-gen work. We're really building with 2-gen whole family on what we've learned from the past. So 2-gen 1.0 really started, well, some people will say the original 2-gen program is the Head Start program, because from the very beginnings in the 1960s, Head Start was designed to serve parents and children. And then with welfare reform around 1996, there was a new effort to serve parents to help get them off of welfare, as they would say. And in that effort, there was an integration of services, but we really found that some of these things that I was just mentioning, that quality really matters, intensity matters, and who you target. So we've learned from those earlier 2-gen efforts, whether it was Head Start or a 2-gen 1.1 with welfare reform, that sort of the intensity, the quality, and who you're targeting matters. So you want to really think through those things as you're putting your design together. And then finally, our friends at Ascend have identified some 2Gen guiding principles, and we really encourage you to look at the materials on the Ascend website. Some of these principles overlap some of the characteristics that I've just talked about, but it includes a few more principles that are really important, like number 2 here, which is engaging and listening to the voices of families. We really want to listen and design alongside families when we're building our 2Gen approaches. Families are the experts in their experiences and their needs. And some of the best 2Gen whole family approaches that Tiffany and I have seen are the approaches that really engage families in the design. So we can't say enough about how important that effort is. And then really ensuring equity. We know that there are a lot of inequities baked in to our systems and our policies, even inside our organizations and our communities, and really thinking about how we can address equity in our design. And then I mentioned science earlier, but really thinking about how we foster innovation and evidence. And I would say, applying, the latest science about what we know works and for who and when, and really thinking about that as we design our programs. So finally, we have several slides here for you that highlight tools and resources. There's a lot of great material out there that you can read to help you get up to speed on 2Gen and whole family. And we know that many of you that will be listening to this webinar are in the processes of designing your approach, and so we wanted to share this design plan that the Community Action Partnership has put together that really helps you establish a clear vision and think about how you measure progress to that vision, what you might need to do regarding activities and partners, and answering a whole set of questions. And here's just a few components that are listed in the design plan. In addition to outlining your results, really identifying your problem and the root cause of that problem, looking at what the journey looks like for your customers as far as getting access, so doing some journey mapping, thinking about your assumptions and the target population, which is really important, thinking about your partners and your services and your outcomes. And so if you walk through this whole design plan, at the end you will have a theory of change and a logic model, which is really key to success. A lot of the 2Gen whole family efforts that have been supported by philanthropy, when they've been assessed, one of the findings that often you see is that the theory of change or the logic model for the approach was not clearly defined or needed to be fleshed out a little bit more. So I would encourage anybody out there who's sort of thinking about embarking on a 2Gen whole family journey to really use something like this design plan to develop your theory of change and your logic model. Also at the Community Action Partnership, after working with probably nearly 100 community-based organizations, we've developed these building blocks for agencies that are trying to shift to a whole family approach. And this is really based on the training and technical assistance needs of a lot of agencies as they sort of pursue their journey. So some of this you'll see overlaps with the 2Gen principles like engaging family voice, but we also have items here about attending to organizational culture and systems change, building and using leadership, securing funding and other resources. These are also really important areas you need to think about if you're really going to make a successful shift to a whole family approach. So at the website, at the link listed here, we have a resource document that has a number of articles and briefs that you can read about each of these building blocks. And, I always say if you have a team that's working on a 2-gen whole family design, split up the building blocks and have somebody get to reading all of these resources in each area, and then you'll have a number of people who are sort of experts in different building block areas to help design your approach. Here's I mentioned Ascend at the Aspen Institute and all their resources, and these are just a few of the good resources they have as you're thinking about your outcomes for your effort. You can go to the 2Gen Outcomes Bank and find some really good suggestions for outcomes for parents, children, and the family. And then they've got a series of 101, 201, 301 documents that you can work through, and even more current items like a 2Gen framing guide that really help you to think about how you frame up 2Gen and how you talk about that in your community. And then also at the Administration for Children and Families, the Office of Planning, Research, and Evaluation has issued a couple of reports that are based on research and literature that they've done around 2Gen whole family. And these items really help you think through your design. So I really encourage folks to look at the conceptual framework that OPRE has designed and help that inform your journey. So here is my email and Tiffany's email and our contact information. And we encourage you to reach out if you have questions. We're happy to connect people to resources. We're pleased to present this information to you today. And thank you for your time, and especially thank you for your efforts to improve conditions for parents and children and families in your communities. Have a good day.